All right. Well, this is the book. That's what the cover looks like. And how to introduce this thing. I guess the shortest introduction would be I guess I'm the creeping academicism that Ian was just talking about. Because this book is deeply, deeply, deeply academic. But that's because I am, in addition to being a glitch artist, I'm also an academic. So I guess I can be forgiven for writing an academic book. At least I hope I can be forgiven for writing an academic book. Now, how do I get to the next page? The glitches just proliferate. All right, so here's the book. It's going to play very quickly. The argument in this book is fundamentally about interpretation. And glitch is one of those things that, in my view, at least as a theorist, glitch allows us to access things that we wouldn't normally be able to access. It lets us look at our own processes of thinking, our own procedures, our own protocols, because glitch is an unresolvable superposition. It allows us to look at how it resolves in both ways, but in resolving into two opposite things that are mutually exclusive, it tells us something about that resolution. So as a theorist, the glitch becomes this doorway into this realm of processes and engagements and interpretations that we wouldn't normally have access to. And this is a book that starts with that observation about experience and then goes into other things. Ideas about how interpretation works come out of this, questions about intentions, questions about human agency, which of course lead us to questions about what art has to do with machines and how human agency fits into the machine, and obviously artificial intelligence and how all of this stuff fits together. So there's lots and lots of ramifications that just kind of come spilling out of the investigation of glitches. And that's what makes glitches so interesting to me as a theorist. At the same time, I'm also somebody who's been making these for decades now. And the glitches that I make end up informing very directly the kind of things that I'm talking about as a theorist. The theory itself always falls back on empirical examples, actual things you can point at in the environment, actual evidence, things that have really been done and made, and all of that really good stuff that you want. So you can say, okay, yes, this is actually talking about something concrete. It's not just kind of vaporware theory up in the sky, floating around, not really saying anything about the real world. The whole point of this approach is that it's tied to the real world, that it brings us back to the actual empirical encounter with the object, how we parse that encounter, what it is that makes something a glitch, how we know it's a glitch versus not a glitch, how we know not to ignore it, all of those good things that we want to do with glitches. So it ends up being a really strange book in that regard, because it's not really an art history book, it's not really a theory book, it's not really a philosophy book. It's somehow doing all of these things, or trying to do all of these things in some fashion at the same time. But that kind of expansion is, in a sense, it's built into semiotics, because the kinds of questions that semiotics asks are very different than the kind of questions we normally ask when we're confronting philosophy, or when we're confronting art history, or when we're confronting just normal kinds of investigation. Because the sort of semiotics I engage with, I'm going to explain this in my talk in a minute, so don't worry if it doesn't make any sense yet. It will make sense because this is something I'm going to talk about in the other presentation I have. And that is the idea of something that I call mobile articulation. This is a concept I've more or less stolen from Umberto Eco. He mentions it in passing, talking about movies and photographs, and he doesn't see anything else other than they seem to have mobile articulation. And I saw that, and it's like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly the idea, the term that I need. So mobile articulation is the idea that you begin with your perceptions, and then you re-articulate them repeatedly, building upon your initial understandings to build far more complex, far more dynamic, and ultimately much less grounded in reality kinds of interpretations. But because they're mobile, at any given moment, the entire house of cards that you have built for this interpretation could completely reconfigure itself, not so much collapse, but rebuild in new, different alternative ways. And very often this happens instantaneously for us. It's like you look at an optical illusion, say a duck rabbit. You look at one side of the image, it's a duck. And you look at the other side of the image, it becomes a rabbit. And nothing happens in between other than your eyes move. The image doesn't change. All that changes is your interpretation. But that interpretation is mobile, because how you're assigning values to all of these elements that you're looking at, these semantic cues that you're picking out of your perceptions. In picking out those cues, then assigning values to them, then assigning meanings to them, then reinterpreting all of those meanings, we ultimately build this very dynamic kind of interpretation. And what I'm saying Glitch does in this book is that Glitch allows us to revisit that initial assignment of meaning. It allows us access to all of those things. And when we start talking about glitch art, what glitch art is doing, at least theoretically for me, in terms of semiotics, is it's exploiting that reinterpretation for poetic ends, for expressive ends. And that reinterpretation becomes central to the entire form and structure of the work, that instability that's so foundational. Because every time you see a glitch, like, for example, the cover here, this is definitely a glitch. And I'm amazed that anybody would let me post this as the cover of the book. I'm still shocked that the publisher let me. Because you put this up on a website, everybody's going to say, oh, it's broken. But it's not broken. And that's glitch. And that's how glitch acts in glitch art, is that it's both broken and not broken, more or less at the same time. And we have to be constantly taking a hold of, yes, it's broken, no, it's not. And we can't ever really settle in either position. Because to say, oh, it's expressive, it's not broken, then it's not a glitch. But to say it's a glitch means it's just an alternative process. It's fully automatic. It has nothing to do with being expressive. So it can't be meaningful. But it is meaningful. So it can't be a glitch, but it is a glitch. And you see the cycle that repeats and repeats and repeats. That's superposition. That's what seems like a paradox, but it's actually a product of our own interpretations. And this is the starting point for this book. That's not where we end, that's where we begin. And everything else in it is an elaboration and a complexification of that initial idea. So that's what I have to say about it. I know that was probably much too fast.
No, that's great. It was a great summary. Okay. So the problem is a little bit that I need your help and Lawrence, because our book, Lewis and Dean wanted to present it, and we will present it now at the end. I will talk a little bit about the books which are behind me, and then we make a little bit of a break and arrange everything. So yeah, and then I can show our book with the playlist. So we are okay. Then I'm going to our book. So I'm continuing with the promotion of Michael. That's that's a very interesting book, and because of the cats. Would you like to tell the stories with the cat, because it's a very the cat piano, because it's a very interesting metaphor for digitality, and I read it.
Let me show a picture of it, because you need this is something you need visuals for. So I have a picture right here. It's not. Here you go. This is a cat organ.
Yeah.
You like cats, this is absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, and you know, to me, it's a very good metaphor for the black box. You know, it's the black box. And it's really crazy. So I mean, I don't know if the old audience knows everything. Could you tell us a little bit what's the clue of this picture is?
Well, I'll tell a story about how I learned about it. And in the course of telling the story, I'll explain why it's important to me.
Yeah.
And it's not because I don't like cats. There's an article in a book about weird scientific instruments by Thomas Hankins. And one of his chapters is talking about this thing he calls a cat organ. And it appears prominently in this book by Veckerlin from the 19th century called Musiciana, strange and bizarre anecdotes about music. And the very last thing in the book is this discussion of the cat organ, in which he talks about a procession. It's not really clear where, it's not really clear when, in his book, but it's a medieval procession in which you have this whole peaceable kingdom culminating in a performance of this thing called the cat organ. And the cat organ is fascinating because it's cast all of these various echoes throughout our culture. It's an instrument where the cat, for the medieval paradigm, the cat is a kind of instrument of the devil, a vehicle of deviltry, black cats especially. So what happens is the cat is subjugated to the divine order. A series of cats are selected based on their ability to mew on pitch. They are arranged in a box, and then their tails are jerked, poked, prodded, something to make them mew, and they become the voices of the musical instrument. And so it comes as the climax of this peaceable kingdom procession, where at the very end you have someone playing the cat organ, demonstrating God's power over everything. But inside this box, the cats don't actually matter. The cats in themselves are unimportant. It's their ability to become stand-ins for this symbolic value, the peaceable kingdom. It's their ability to become samples where each cat literally is a living sample for the note that it plays. In a way, they're anticipating things like Jingle Cats, the Christmas album from the 1990s, where someone took a bunch of cats and auto-tuned them and then arranged them on their keyboard so they could play Christmas music with cat meows. And it's real. It's called Jingle Cats. They did 2 albums in the 90s. They are not particularly musical. Probably more musical than the cat organ. And this was one of those things that I learned about and I kept thinking about and I kept returning to, because it's really a model for sampling. And in a sense, this is the birth of the idea of sampling, where each cat is a sample. The only thing that matters is their symbolic role as the note that they perform. And in a way, that is the ancestor to everything that we do with the digital computer, because our sounds are sampled at so many times per second in order to achieve a more or less continuous performance of sound. The image that the little camera right up here in this, right here, that it captures, it quantizes all of the data, sends it as a stream. All of that quantized data is sampled. It's carved up into little tiny boxes, the pixels of our screens. All of this is the descendant of the cat organ. And the cat organ's just refusal of the continuous reality of the world and of the cats themselves. And there's definitely something ethical to be said about that the cats don't matter, that the only thing that's important is their role as data. So when I was preparing the introduction to my collection of essays that I published with a journal called Sea Theory that used to be online, they're gone now, about digital capitalism, it seemed like the best way to introduce everything, because it really encapsulated all of the issues that everything else in the book elaborates as this collection of essays published over about a 10-year period. So
yeah,
a lot of ideas in there that come out of that notion of sampling.
In German, we have a certain word, and that's Katzenjammer. Yeah, it's or singing like a cat or something like this. And I'm sure that John Cage and Stockhausen and Theodor W. Adorno would love it